Hello everyone, and welcome to Blood, Guts, and Social Commentary. I figure what better addition to the 1,000 subscriber special than a viewer request. Today we are going to be talking about the class system again, but this time through the lens of American Psycho. I did an episode about this earlier where I used the Purge franchise and Rope, but you don't really need that episode to understand this one. Well, it should be obvious, just gonna put it out there, obvious spoilers ahead if you have not seen American Psycho. I'm also not even gonna touch the sequel of American Psycho 2 All-American Girl. The 2000 film American Psycho opens with the main character Patrick Bateman being in a restaurant with two of his friends, and the term friends is used loosely here. They are surrounded by really well-groomed wait staff, they are impeccably dressed, and they're being read this list off the menu of just these very high-class, very expensive foods. So we know right from the beginning, these people are affluent. Just to hammer that point home, at the end of the meal, they even say, oh, it's only $5.70. We're assuming $570 because $5.70 for 3 people is way too low. But for most people, $570 for a meal for 3 people, and it looks like just on a weekday, just random meal, is a bit extravagant. All of them throw in their credit cards to pay, and we just keep seeing status symbol after status symbol in this scene. Then cuts to Patrick Bateman's apartment, which is weird. It's very minimalist, but he's reading off this laundry list of hygiene products that we're going to assume are expensive because A, of their packaging, and B, just what he's explaining and how many he uses. The thing with a lot of these products, especially in the 80s though, a lot of them are probably not doing much for him, if anything. So he's spending all this money on these hygiene and beauty products that probably aren't going to end up helping him in the long run, and he's just throwing money away. But for him to be able to do this every single morning, of working out and taking the shower with this scrub and this moisturizer and that exfoliant, just shows how decadent his lifestyle is. Which is a little strange because you would think somebody with such a minimalist apartment, they wouldn't have a whole lot of stuff, but it seems like all of the stuff he really acquires is for grooming, or very nice suits, or very nice linens. He probably spent a crazy amount on all of his furniture, and everything in his apartment is well curated and costs a lot. He just doesn't need to buy multiple things to show his status. We then cut to his office. His assistant comes in first thing. He immediately starts asking her to get reservations at this restaurant and that restaurant and this restaurant. So the restaurants will play in huge in this movie. Because to keep his mystique and his appearance of being this well-crafted, well-cultured, well-dressed young man, because he's only 27, he needs to be seen at very specific places, and he needs to be seen at very specific places with very specific people. While he views everybody kind of beneath him, he realizes the value others have in these relationships, and since he can get them and other people can't, that's a big deal for him. And we see this treatment of people being beneath him very early in. His assistant, well, yes, she's probably there for business needs, and you can argue the reservations could be for clients. He then gets on her about her appearance. He tells her her outfit's hideous and that she's too pretty for it. So he insists that she never wear what she's wearing again, and only wear heels, skirts, things like that, things that he likes. Or quote-unquote likes, because it's kind of facetious in the fact that he doesn't really like anything. He points out later on the only discernible emotions he has are disgust and greed. Again, though, he realizes that his assistant looking nice and being one of the more attractive assistants in this small community of very affluent business people is going to end up reflecting on him. Because if she looks nice and she's well kept, it reflects that he is nice and he is well kept and expects that of the people he directly is above. This point is hammered home that evening when he is going to dinner with his girlfriend. Him and his girlfriend are taking a cab. She is dressed in a very nice outfit with a fur coat. And it's just going on and on about Godiva Chocolates, getting Anne Leibovitz as a photographer, And you realize very quickly she's talking about planning a wedding. She looks over at Patrick and said, let's just do it. And he's like, do what? And he's like, get married. So there's never a discussion of emotion about it. There's never a discussion of, well, we've been dating, we love each other, we this, we that. It's this very cold, clinical, we should get married because we have the money to put on this high-end wedding and spend all this money and show how much pull we have. The wedding is a complete status symbol and just something to solidify that yes, we are better than you and we have better taste and our wedding looks better than yours will. Patrick doesn't really care that he is busy having a panic attack about the table at the restaurant because he's concerned he's not going to get a good table. Of course, he's relieved when he does, but that is emotion most men would have towards the idea of marriage, or even women. Marriage is a huge step. And a lot of people are very gun-shy about it. And there is that old trope in television shows and movies where somebody starts dropping hints towards marriage and it's typically the guy flips out and has a panic attack and bails or has a minor freak out. So that's the amount of emotion we would expect to that, but it's all about a table at a restaurant. Because that is what's going to really show his status. He's like, no, here and now, I need to be seen at this restaurant, I need to be seen at this table, and I need to be seen with this girl. When they get to their well-crafted and very much desired table, they meet two other people. They're talking throughout dinner and just normal conversation. At one point, one of the women asks if Soho's getting too commercial. Another friend that's joined later pipes in with all of the atrocities that are happening in Sri Lanka. It seems like he's more or less trying to quote the news and hasn't really formed an opinion. He just knows this is an important thing to care about right now. Bateman counters with a massive laundry list of atrocities going on with things like world hunger. But his last talking point is really what's interesting. He says we should be focusing on ending consumerism. Now, as I already said, Bateman consumes a lot of high-end hygiene products. He has impeccable linens, which is shown a bit later on when he's fighting with a dry cleaner about getting a quote-unquote gran apple juice stain off of a white sheet. She wants to bleach it. He says it's this very specific, very expensive, delicate fabric and you cannot bleach that. Somebody he knows walks in and he tries to get them to talk to the dry cleaner for him because he has a meeting. You know, his time is much more important than this friend. And that's where he tells them it's cran apple juice stain. It's obviously blood. Given the coloring and the fact that it's so big, like this thing took over almost the entire sheet, you would have to pretty much dump an entire bottle of cran apple juice, like a big, nice plastic bottle, onto your bed to get a stain that size. With that and his penchant for killing people, you can reasonably deduce it's blood. So him saying he wants to end consumerism when he's clearly all about consumerism, because what he consumes is what allows him to show off to everybody, hey, this is who I am and this is how much better I am than you. So it's clear he's just spouting off talking points he's heard elsewhere. And this is a pretty common theme through this movie. Every time he talks about food at a restaurant itself, music, anything like that, it seems like he's almost quoting reviews and analysis he's read. Later on, he takes his mistress to a restaurant. He couldn't get reservations at the one he wanted, but since she's so drugged up, he takes her to a completely different restaurant and lies about where it is. Even though the name's on the back of the menu, she's just too messed up to care. He orders for her because, again, he has to exercise that control. She is beneath him. He is better than her. He will dictate what she eats. But when he's giving the description, it's clearly from some kind of review. Later on, there's a scene, and it's probably one of the most iconic scenes in this movie, where he's killing somebody to Huey Lewis in the News, Hip to Be a Square. When he's talking to them about it, though, he specifically says the song is about the pleasures of conformity and fitting in, which is echoed before in the movie when he's talking to his girlfriend. She says he can just take time off from work for the wedding or whatever, essentially calling him out on like, why do you even work? You have all this money, who cares? It's to keep up his lifestyle, but he says he wants to fit in. He wants to fit in. He wants to work among these people because that's how he's going to keep up this facade of being normal and having emotions. Because it's very clear, very early in, this guy's a sociopath. He doesn't feel things. All he says is he feels greed and disgust. That's all that matters. That's all that drives him. And his level of disgust is just so high with the people he views as below him, which is pretty much everyone, that he's just terrified of losing that status and people finding out that he's not really this or that. This is really what leads into probably the second or first, debatably, most iconic scene in this film, is where they're showing each other their business cards and talking about what color stock they got it put on, what font they chose. Because in the business world, yes, you're going to hand somebody your business card, but that business card is the lasting memory of you. It better be something that stands out, which is kind of strange because everybody had basically something in the White family with black text in just different fonts, and most of the fonts seem to be some kind of play on Times New Roman or a very base level font. Nothing was very scripted and fancy. It was just very different strike letters that are very bold and make it very easy to read. But all of these men take such value in these business cards representing a piece of who they are to potential business contacts, clients, people they may end up socializing with, that they need it to be perfect. They need to sit there and nitpick every single bit of the font, which I understand. I get the importance of typography, not dismissing that. But I'm saying to the average Joe, they probably won't care as long as it's not something that they can't read. So again, this is pointing out the hypocrisy in him wanting to end consumerism, because that's a commodity. You ordered those, you paid for those, you made somebody make you this product. Another big point in his hypocrisy is he runs into a homeless man in an alleyway and says, "Do you need food? Do you need money?" To most normal people, that would be some kind of offer of, "Hey, I see you need help. Let me help you." Bateman talks to him and is kind of making these almost offers while insulting the man, saying things like, "Why don't you get a job?" He explains that he's lost his job. Well, he goes, "Well, did drinking cost you your job?" Which is hilarious considering Bateman does coke. They've made it very clear he does coke. So again, we're even getting this classist status symbol with drugs, because coke is expensive, especially for the time period. That was the big in thing. The hippest people were doing cocaine, and he can afford it, and he can afford it to a surprising degree. This man here is probably struggling for enough money to buy just a bottle of beer if he is an alcoholic. Again, that's a low-class thing. Even when Bateman drinks, it's always high-end champagne. It's never anything you would see this guy drinking. Bateman's probably going to assume he drinks like Mad Dog or 40s or something like that. That's very low-class peasant liquor. I'm not knocking Mad Dog or anything like that. Just saying that there is some classism in their drugs of choice. Bateman also deduces that this guy's negative attitude is holding him back, and how he smells like shit, and how no one's gonna hire him because he smells like shit. At one point, he even says, like, "I'll help you." And this man views help as helping him find a job, because that's what he wants. He wants to work. He wants to work and not be homeless. Instead, Patrick tells him what a useless piece of crap he is and kills him and his dog. Right there in the alley, not attempting to hide it from anyone. I mean, it was a dark alley, but still, he didn't check to see if there were people around. He just did it because he felt entitled to, because this person was so much less than him and his friends and everybody else. Because again, he's consuming these higher end things, whereas this guy, yeah, might be consuming, but he's consuming low end, and who cares about that? The point of consumerism comes up again when he's at a Christmas party with his girlfriend, and she says, "Oh, what do you want for Christmas?" and don't say a boob job again. So either they've been together for a minute and he's asked for this repeatedly, or he's made offhanded remarks before this party about wanting her to get a boob job. And for the record, if you haven't seen this movie but are watching this anyway, the girl that plays his girlfriend is a very young Reese Witherspoon. Most people were going to find her very attractive. Suggesting she gets plastic surgery to most people is ridiculous. Most people would be happy to look like Reese Witherspoon. Let alone, I feel like most heterosexual men would be happy if their girlfriend looked like Reese Witherspoon. But with remarks like that, it's obvious that he wants to exercise some level of control. We see this again when Bateman picks up a prostitute off of a corner, like legitimately off of a corner. While they're in the cab, going back to his place, he calls for a call girl as well. because he wants to have a threesome and is very specific. He wants his call girl to have blonde hair. He's very disappointed when she shows up with quote-unquote dirty blonde hair. So I guess his definition is platinum, like the first girl he picked up. The entire time, he gives them very cold, very clinical directions about what he wants to see and what he wants them to do. He even points out how expensive the champagne is that they're drinking. He doesn't care that these are women that most people would view as low class, uneducated, and just not in good regard at all. He cares that these are people that he can pay to do what he wants. And he doesn't care if he's giving them high-end alcohol because he has that kind of money and needs to show it to everybody, no matter how much he may or may not value them, as an asset to his social standing. Now, I know this movie as well as the book both got panned a lot for very anti-female tones and descriptions of things, which to a point is fair. More women in this movie died than men, which is pretty rare if you've listened to the gender equality in horror episode. Most of the body count either seems to be about split even between genders, or more men die, unless you have an all-female cast, which then the point's moot. So this one's a rarity in the fact we do get more females than men dying. But to be fair, Bateman and his friends objectify everybody. There's a point where they're all at a bar just talking about women and basically saying they don't care her personality as long as she looks a certain way and is quiet. And just, they never say it outright, but it's clear that they want her to be subservient. Now, a lot of people view that as very objective towards women, and it is. No arguments here on that. The thing I'd like to point out, though, is during this conversation, there is a news program on that has Reagan's address about the Iran-Contra scandal. For those unfamiliar with the Iran-Contra scandal, I'm just going to give a really quick summary of it off Wikipedia. Contragate, or the Iran-Contra scandal, was a political scandal in the United States that occurred during the second term of the Reagan administration. Senior administration officials secretly facilitated the sale of arms to Iran, which was the subject of an arms embargo. Just off of that very rough and dirty synopsis, it's clear that this was an important thing, especially at the time period, because this movie is based in the 80s. But they apply the same mindset they were just applying to women to Reagan himself. They're talking about how he looks so old and how he doesn't look that great. And they flat out say, but inside doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that this guy is the president of the United States. It doesn't matter that he's talking about this very important issue. All that matters is where they are right now and who they're with. It's typically safe to say most Americans don't view themselves as above the president. You get the people that think they're smarter than the president. I'm not going to get into the current situation right now because that's just neither here nor there. Just as a whole, most Americans socially believe they are not on par with the president. These guys are putting themselves above him now, and they seem to believe they are more powerful and more influential than Reagan. That they could be doing this job and be better at it and be better looking, because that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what he's actually doing, it matters how he looks doing it. This sense of insecurity and this sense of needing everybody to know all the time where you're at and how you are. I know it feels like I'm beating a dead horse on this movie with that, but it just keeps coming up and it's so freaking important to him. At one point, Patrick fakes getting a restaurant reservation in front of his secretary. He says he wants to take her out to dinner. She says where she wants to go. He says he's got it, calls them, and you can hear, the audience can hear on the other end, the guy going, no, we're booked. We can't get you a table. No, I can't get you a reservation. Well, Patrick's responding, oh, thank you for getting us table for 2 at 9, because he needs his assistant to believe this. Well, it's clear she's going to be impressed no matter where they go. It's clear that she has a thing for him. It's clear that she already realizes he is above her. He has to solidify it and hammer it home just how much status and much sway he has. It doesn't matter that she is beneath him. He just needs her to know she is beneath him. And this attitude kind of plays out in a oddly different way later on in the film. He has a friend, quote unquote, over, and he's also re-picked up the hooker that he got off the corner earlier in the film. She admits she needed an operation after the last time they saw each other. She threatens a lawsuit. He obviously gives her big sums of money to keep her quiet, because that's just how this world works to him. While he has these 2 females over, he's obviously pushing for a threesome again, because that's just what he wants. The one girl is very drugged up and is drinking on top of that, So at one point, when she is making out with the prostitute, Patrick's just sitting there going on and on and on about Whitney Houston's first album. This girl kind of starts laughing at him and goes, "You own a Whitney Houston CD? I can't believe you own a Whitney Houston CD." Clearly trying to stab and poke at his manhood. But it's this weird dichotomy because he gives off this completely unfazed air. Were it anybody else, you would read it as he is so comfortable in his masculinity and sexuality, he doesn't care that this girl's ripping on him for having a Whitney Houston CD. Which is actually a kind of positive way to be. Like what you like. But in reality, and with the way he feels and all that, this girl doesn't mean anything. Her opinion doesn't mean anything. She's so drugged, she's probably not going to remember anything. But this is also because Patrick knows he's going to kill her. He knows she's not going to live to tell anybody else about it because she is just that disposable. So why should he care about the opinion of a woman who not only is so far beneath him, she doesn't register, that he's just gonna kill anyway? Not too long after this murder takes place, because he kills the girl that was making fun of him, he also kills the prostitute. Things start really falling apart very quickly. So he goes to dump his girlfriend. And her entire argument about them not breaking up is because they have mutual friends. It would totally throw off the social circle because they have mutual friends, so they have to stay together. Again, this is not a relationship. This is clearly for status for him as much as her, it seems. Because she pointed out the mutual friend thing. She was the one that wanted the wedding for no other reason than she was just talking about expensive things. So she does seem to have some emotional attachment to him, but not very much. It's more an emotional attachment to the status he gives her. So he leaves after she makes this big scene about them breaking up. Very soon after that, he goes to an ATM. He starts having a delusion that the ATM's saying, "Feed me, stray cat." He picks up a cat. He's holding a gun on the cat, but an older lady comes up and she's in fur and very well dressed and tells him to stop. He shoots her. Patrick has killed a lot of people already in this movie, but they were all either in his apartment or in his apartment complex or just in an alley. This is the first time he's done something outdoors, out in the open, in a very affluent area. And this is also probably why the cops come, because you didn't hear police sirens when he killed the homeless man. You haven't heard police sirens when he's killed all those people in his apartment. Well, yeah, you can argue he probably soundproofed his apartment or something like that. The girl running down the staircase that he tracks with the chainsaw, this is not soundproof. So it kind of speaks to how detached the area he's living in is, because they just probably assume all the screaming, or they treat all the screaming they probably hear as none of their business. There's also possibly another point to this, but I won't talk about that till the end. After he shoots this woman, by the way, the kitten was fine. He didn't do anything to it beyond holding the gun on it. He didn't actually shoot. He walks into a building, man asks him to sign in, and he shoots him. He now is on this killing spree in this very affluent area. So he actually has cops kind of near and around. Because he even says at one point, he wants to inflict his pain on others. He wants the world to feel just the pain he feels. That's just the only thing close to enjoyment it seems like he can feel, because, again, he said, "I can only feel greed and disgust." So if he can't feel any form of pleasure, it seems like this is the closest equation he can get to that of hurting other people and exercising that control and just feeding into the psychosis he has. This is also probably part of why he doesn't collect trophies, as most horror films establish serial killers like to take something from their victims, and that seems to be true in real life as well. Patrick never does that. And my assumption on that would be because he views these human beings as just the way most people would view an ant or a grub. Why would he take something off of them? Why would he want that filth around him in his apartment that he is so meticulously taken care of to be exactly what he wants and every single speck of it? Why would he glitter that up with trophies? Because his apartment really does look like you could do a shoot for it on Apartment Therapy. It is so meticulously crafted, and he needs it to be like that. He needs everything in his life to be like that. It's probably making him feel like he's managing the psychosis a little bit, or at least managing it to other people. But again, it's also this massive symbol of his status and his success in business. To hark back a little to the First Class System episode I did, American Psycho is what Rope would have been. Rope, for those that aren't aware, it was a Hitchcock film about two boys that murder somebody that while they're in their class and station, they view to be beneath them because they feel that there are people above that are allowed to commit murder to people below. So it's their exercise in trying to pull off the perfect crime. This is what would happen if those kids hadn't screwed up. If their plan hadn't unraveled, they would have become Patrick Bateman. They would have learned to detach. Or it's arguable he never was able to attach. It's very possible. Which really brings it into kind of the closing point of this film and the ending of the film. The psychosis is the class system. Well, yes, there's a lot of people that got ahead in business by being decent human beings. The normal stereotype and the story most people have is they stepped on somebody, they hurt somebody, they cut down this, that, and the other to get to where they were. So for Patrick Bateman to be successful in business, he had to completely detach, and his psychosis became an asset. And throughout this video, if it felt like I was kind of being too critical on Patrick Bateman, to be fair, everybody else around him is like this too. They're just not as good, or they don't have psychosis to back it up. It's hard to tell if this was a chicken or the egg thing. It's hard to tell if this guy was born with it, or he was just raised in such a clinical environment and around so many people like this that he just adopted it and realized, if I kill off emotion, I become successful. This is why there's so much debate over this film. Throughout the film, it is hard to tell if Patrick is saying things and people are ignoring them, or he's just in a fantasy where he says it. Because barely anybody reacts. The only time we super get a reaction is when he's talking to the homeless man telling him he smells like shit because he does look a little offended. And when he's talking to his assistant about her outfit. Those are the only times he really gets a reaction. When he confesses to killing people, when he talks about how much he hates people, how he wants to graphically murder them, they just go on about like nothing happened. So this leads to two possible theories about this film. Either he lives in a society that's so detached that he's sitting there confessing to all these things and no one cares because it doesn't involve them and it doesn't better their station. Or that he never actually said those things and this is all in his head and he never actually killed anybody. Both theories have really strong points for them, and I'm not going to sit here and try and push people one way or the other, but those are really the two options. Either the world around him is just as messed up as him, he's just more honest about it, and that nobody's going to react and no one cares that he's killing these people because he is what they need him to be. Or this is just him living out his very vivid fantasies in his own head of killing these people and of doing terrible things to people. If it was the fantasy though, Patrick's taken it to kind of another level, because even with the fantasy theory, I still would contest he's clearly detached and devoid of emotion. Because even if we were to take out the fantasy confessions, the movie still holds a whole lot of this guy is not connected with reality anymore. And both of these theories really speak to the world around him. In the universe where he did tell all these people things, they're so self-absorbed just like he is, they don't care, and they're just not going to pay attention until it starts to affect them, which when it starts to affect them, it's probably already too late. In the fantasy theory, it shows that the people around him knew something was going on and they didn't really step in to help, but it also does that whole, you never know what somebody else is thinking. Because at least the way I would take it is, if he was fantasizing about these things, he probably just kept a very stone solemn demeanor. He didn't really react to it while he was fantasizing. So people were probably just seeing him trail off and not really contribute or just kind of space out a little bit and didn't seem to think that was an issue. Well, there's plenty of people that do that. If he's doing it this consistently and more frequently, it's obvious there's something going on and maybe somebody should at least ask if he's okay. A quick, simple, hey, are you alright? That never really happened. This idea is also why American Psycho doesn't, to a lot of people, read as a straight up horror film. In a weird way, it is almost this incredibly dark comedy and satire on the class system and how we've built these different levels of I'm up here, you're down here, this person's over there, this person's way all the way down here. And how that can get really out of control very quickly because it's very easy to look at the people beneath you and go, you're not anything anymore. If you're not doing something for me, why are you even a thing? And to view everybody else as a leech. Not to editorialize too much, but this does happen in the real world. I've seen plenty of people that I know have received unemployment or welfare at some point in their life talking about how everybody on unemployment and welfare is a leech. When I point out, hey, I know you got assistance, they go, well, that's different. And it's like, well, who are you to say these other people over here aren't in the same, if not worse situation that you were in? Why are you entitled and they're not? And this seems to really be what this movie's trying to hammer home is, why is one person entitled above everybody else? Why did this happen versus that? And how far is it gonna go? And how far do we let it go before it gets checked? The very wealthy seem to kind of live in this different bubble than everybody else. It's not necessarily a bad thing. People work for things, people get money. And what this is trying to kind of hammer home is the very, very wealthy and the very, very powerful have this kind of bubble that's very different from the rest of the world. And while that's not inherently a bad thing, isolating like that and making your own little cluster and echo chamber like that can have some very disastrous effects. This being kind of the worst case scenario of somebody just indiscriminately killing people. Or if somebody just killing people, it wasn't as indiscriminate because he seemed to kind of plan it out until he got a little bit more impulsive. And that's, again, going with the real world theory if he actually killed these people. But even in Fantasyland, he got more and more impulsive with his kills, which is how a lot of people get caught. So what do you think? Do you think everything was in his head? Do you think he really did these things? Do you think Patrick Bateman is a embodiment of something completely different? Please feel free to leave your ideas in the comments. And if you like what you're hearing, please like, subscribe, anything like that. If you don't like what you're hearing, please feel free to leave a comment. Like I said, this was a viewer request. I'm more than happy to do them. Thank you.